Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Saturday. Hopefully, we're having a wonderful first kind of weekend of October here. And boy, oh boy, we cannot catch a break in the tropics this year. Unfortunately, things have really kind of gone from 0 to 100 really quickly in the Gulf of Mexico. And we were talking about this in yesterday's video. I said that some of the models had kind of been hinting at potentially that area of development getting into a stronger storm. And now the latest model guidance has really bumped this up. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to potentially have a major hurricane moving towards the Florida Gulf Coast by the middle of next week. So obviously not what you want to hear, not what you want to see in the models. But unfortunately, that little bit of vorticity that came out of the Pacific really amped this area up in the Gulf of Mexico. It's really been able to kind of separate itself from any other vortexes in the area, and is taking full advantage of its environment. So that's going to be a big time story in today's video. We will briefly touch on the rest of the tropics, also on a fall time cold front that's going to sweep on through the country here through the beginning of next week, about the same time that this hurricane is working on through. At least I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm assuming this will probably be a hurricane at or near landfall. And again, we'll take a look at the models, but again, so yeah, it's an active scene here for a lot of us. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do so. That's a great way to stay informed here during these active times of weather. Also, hit that bell for the latest notifications. That'll tell you every time I upload with an update here with the new model guidance and a breakdown of that guidance. Like the video, comment, let me know where you're watching from, especially you folks in Florida. I got a lot of family down in Florida, so I'm definitely going to send this video their way. If you have family or friends down that way, send it to them as well. So they are kind of in the loop here about what is on the way, because again, this is going to sneak up on us pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and dive on into that forecast. Now, current look at satellite imagery. This is Hurricane Kirk, major Hurricane Kirk it was. It might actually still be a major hurricane, I'll have to check, but either way, it doesn't really matter. It's not our problem, luckily. Behind that, now newly designated Hurricane Leslie. So we do have two storms currently in the Gulf of Mexico. We also have a new wave to watch coming off of Africa. But the more important thing right now is this tiny little blob you see in the Gulf of Mexico. I know it doesn't look like much right now, but this is very likely to become a tropical storm, potentially as early as today, but definitely by the end of this weekend probably, and that is going to track towards the Sunshine State here and potentially bring hurricane impacts within the next 5 days. So again, things moving pretty quickly here. And this time yesterday, we had a little 40% area in the Gulf of Mexico. Check this out. Now a 90% chance of development over the next 7 days, 70% over the next 48 hours. So we are running a very high chance or probability here that we're going to get a named storm. Again, next name on the list is Milton. So that's our M name. And again, we've really gone through these names pretty quickly over the past couple of weeks. We had Helene a week ago. Now we've got Milton a week later, likely. So, you know, things moving pretty quickly. So, again, that's going to be the main story in today's video. But like I mentioned, Kirk, still a major hurricane, 125-mile-an-hour winds. Leslie, a hurricane with 80-mile-an-hour winds, so a Category 1 and a Category 3, respectively. And then a new area with a 30% chance of development there near the Cabo Verde Islands within the next 7 days. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the main development region of the Atlantic. We won't spend too much time on this. But it is important to talk about, so we will. Major Hurricane Kirk, again, still an impressive looking storm here, battling maybe a little bit of dry air or shear there on its western flank. But again, either way, not our problem. This is going to curve off towards Europe, and I'll show you the cone in a second. Actually, quite an interesting cone with this one, which, again, I'll show you here in just a moment. But besides that, tropical storm Leslie down here into the main development region of the Atlantic, a small storm compared to Kirk, but either way, still expected to eventually curve on out to sea and likely not make any landfall on any sorts of land. So that's the good news there. And then, like I mentioned, pretty robust looking wave here that is soon to move off of Africa. We will need to watch that one for development. Again, the main development region of the Atlantic has really decided to hit its peak a bit later this year, probably, or generally, let me rephrase that, about an entire month later than it normally does. So, you know, kind of interesting stuff there, but it goes to show you, and I told you this earlier in the year, October can be a busy month, and this one so far, sure enough, is shaping up to be one. Now, Hurricane Kirk, this is what I told you that was kind of interesting about this one. Something that I can't really think, or I don't think I've ever seen before. The cone actually takes a lot of Europe into it. So we've got northern France here, from Paris to Amiens through Brussels, and into Amsterdam, and even portions of Germany here, through Hanover, and even close to Hamburg in the cone of uncertainty. So not something you see every day there, but that center line, again, right through northern France, through the English Channel, and then into our friends up into the Netherlands, and through portions of Belgium and Luxembourg. So kind of interesting stuff, not something you see every day, but again, luckily will be a weaker storm by then, a post-tropical cyclone and only with tropical storm force winds, but still some active weather for those folks. So again, it's not something you see every day. And then besides that, again, Hurricane Leslie rather, expected to really just maintain intensity here over the next 5 days or so. And again, you'll notice that cone taking this one well out to sea. So that is the good news there. And I'll even show you some models for it here really quickly. And again, going to breeze through this. Here is Major Hurricane Kirk to the north. Here's Category 1 Hurricane Leslie to the south. And you'll notice as we move this ahead into time, what's going to happen here is, well, they're both going to move out to sea. So there's Kirk moving off your screen. Again, not a problem. Leslie to the south of there, kind of gets shredded apart a little bit too here on some of the models, but stays well away from any sort of landmass, even stays far away from Bermuda, and then all of that is out of here or dying within the next 10 days. So again, not a problem there. We'll take a look at some ensembles here, and the European and its ensemble members, doing a pretty good job here, I think, of showing where everything is going. You'll notice all of these members just out to sea. I will note this is that wave coming off of Africa, this kind of section you see here, but even those look generally like they want to curve out to sea. So we might be pretty good here into the main development region of the Atlantic. The good news for this part of the Atlantic being active this time of the year is we get a lot of cold fronts that kind of sweep on through, and that kind of picks these storms up and moves them out to sea well before they ever get close to any sort of land. So that is the good news there. But again, still an active scene that we will continue to monitor for you. All right. And now, the not-so-fun part of things, not that that was fun per se, but at least those storms aren't impacting anybody. We can kind of just nerd out over some cool weather. This one, though, not a good sign in the Gulf of Mexico. We already have very deep convection firing over what is trying to become a low-level center. And one thing I'm concerned about right off the bat that you'll note here is the size of this storm. Remember a week ago when we had Helene? Helene was a very large storm, and I told you all the problems with large storms and, more storm surge to a bigger area, bigger wind field, more rain in more places. Again, all of that played out. So you're probably wondering, well, why is a small storm a problem? Well, the thing with a small storm is rapid intensification can happen much quicker with these storm systems, and the epicenter of where that eye wall goes through normally is a lot stronger than in a bigger storm. So less people will feel the impacts of the storm, sure, but the people that do feel it will feel it a lot worse than if the storm is maybe larger. So and that's something I'm watching here, and this is just, talking about a tiny storm. This thing is maybe the size of Louisiana or South Carolina is kind of the size of the storm system here. Now, granted, it'll probably get a little bit bigger, but overall, you take this circle and you move it over the state of Florida. This would only cover from, we'll say, the Keys up to Tampa Bay if the center were to go right over Fort Myers. So it's a small storm here, and again, that means that compact center is going to have a lot easier time undergoing rapid intensification, which unfortunately a lot of our models are hinting at here. And you can also see the fanning out of the upper level clouds here, already seeing divergence aloft, and that's really leading to a lot of this thunderstorm activity ongoing. And luckily for us, hurricane hunters are going to fly in there sometime today and give us some more information on it. But I tell you, 2 days ago, it looked like, maybe just some rain in Florida, albeit a lot of it. Now, some of our models are showing a major hurricane making landfall. And I'll tell you, I don't want to sound any alarm bells too soon, but depending on where this makes landfall with some of our model strengths, this really could be close to worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay area. And Tampa Bay overall has been spared through many years here, but it's going to eventually happen. And this really would be kind of worst case scenario track-wise and potentially intensity-wise for that region. So let's go ahead and move this ahead into time. This is our latest GFS model. Again, GFS was not showing a lot a couple days ago. We had maybe a tropical storm. Now look at this. This is Monday evening. We've got a major hurricane of 964 millibars 2 days from now, 2.5 days from now. So when I say things are moving quick here, I mean, they are moving quick. I mean, again, big time hurricane not far from now. We get this into Tuesday afternoon and evening, 947 millibar hurricane. And again, look at how tiny this thing is. I mean, this is a small storm, folks. This is like Hurricane Andrew levels of tiny. And I don't say that to scare you and compare this to Andrew by any means, but I mean, with some of the models we're seeing, again, these small storms, they love to ramp up really quickly. And if I'm anywhere on the west coast of Florida, Tampa Bay, Fort Myers, the Keys, all the way even up through the Big Bend again, Steinhatchee through Perry, anywhere in that region, I'm watching this thing like a hawk because one, there hasn't been a ton of talk about it in terms of it getting this strong. And two, this thing's happening quick. Again, this is Tuesday afternoon. Today's Saturday. We move this even further ahead into time. We get into Wednesday afternoon, and there we go. We got landfall just north of Tampa Bay here on the GFS model as a major hurricane. This is probably a category, we'll say 3 or 4 storm. Again, just quite a beast showing up on these models. So a big time uptrend, unfortunately, with this one. And again, this would be really kind of worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay area. I mean, this would be a very strong storm surge right into the Bay and would probably break plenty of records for storm surge, which unfortunately we obviously don't want to see. And then, the storm crosses the state of Florida and gets back out over the southeast coast and then luckily dies out and moves on out of here. Now, there is one saving grace with this storm, and that is it's moving at a pretty good clip. So, I mean, you notice we'll move this ahead. It's not stalling by any means. I mean, it's hitting and then it's crossing the state of Florida and it's out of here. That's the good news. The other piece of good news, now not good news for you folks in Florida, but good news for the rest of us. This is not one of those storms that is going to bring a big inland impact like Helene did. Again, this is crossing, directly over the state of Florida. So this isn't going to move up into the mountains and cause more landslides and flash flooding. That's not going to be a problem. Worst case for inland impacts would be we get a track kind of far north and maybe places like Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Savannah, Wilmington could get some storm surge and rain out of this, but really that's kind of the worst case scenario for inland impacts. But us folks in the Western Carolinas, not a problem. So again, do not worry about this. Even if it is uptrending in intensity, track is still pretty confident. All right, that was the GFS European model. Again, normally more conservative and similar in this case. It develops a storm a little bit slower, but still, by the time we get to Tuesday afternoon, we've got a borderline hurricane here moving towards the state of Florida and further south on the track with the European model. So you'll notice here, this is landfall more south of Tampa Bay, and this would be worst case more for the Fort Myers area, which obviously we just had Ian not long ago, so we don't want to see this. And then again, luckily crosses the state relatively quickly, and gets on out of here. Now, one thing I do want to know is right here. So we've been talking about predecessor rain events, and this is what happened with Helene in the mountains. They had a ton of rain before the storm ever got there, and that's what caused such big impacts. We could see that again with this one, but for Florida. So kind of what's happening here early in the week is we have an enhanced area of kind of low pressure here, and just this big troughing feature that is kind of extending out from this main storm system. And I think what this is going to do is increase rainfall early in the week through Florida. We're going to have days of a lot of rain well before the storm gets here. And then the storm does get here. Again, you'll notice here, this is Monday afternoon. Look at this heavy banding of rain in front of the storm well before it gets there. And then the storm comes in behind it by Wednesday and then brings, another core of heavy rainfall. So that is something I'm watching with this storm. Obviously, with a strong storm, wind impacts, storm surge impacts will be a problem. But also another predecessor rain event here that could really increase the flooding threat with this storm system. And I'll show you one more model here before we look at kind of some ensembles, ingredients, and then the hurricane models as well we'll take a look at. This is the Canadian, and again, you'll notice the storm kind of gets off your screen there at the bottom. But either way, long-term, same thing. A hurricane moving into South Florida here on the west coast by next week, and slower on the Canadian. This is a Friday landfall. The European we'll go back to was a Wednesday landfall, much like the GFS. So a bit of an outlier here on the Canadian, but just showing it to you, you get the idea. Almost all of our global models are showing a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico making landfall in the west coast of Florida, somewhere from the southern Big Bend down through the Keys. All right, what kind of ingredients are we looking at here? Well, dry air doesn't look to be much of a problem right now. Again, a lot of moisture around the storm, and I'll add, since it's such a small, compact storm, it's easy for these storms to kind of create their own environment. So You'll notice here by Tuesday, not a lot of moist air, but the storm is so small it kind of closes itself off in this bubble of moisture, and this dry air really just struggles to penetrate it. And again, just another sign of strengthening there, holds on to that moisture all the way up to landfall. And then I think at landfall or after landfall, then likely the storm will break down pretty quickly here and die out as a lot of dry air from a cold front kind of works into it. But overall speaking, again, another problem with a small storm is it's harder to break it down once it gets that core going, and it's already trying to get that core going. So, we'll hope dry air can make an impact. There's definitely some in the region for sure. So if, it can penetrate the storm, be our guest, of course, by any means, dry air. But unfortunately, I'm not sure how much it's really going to help us out. All right, wind shear wise, well, right now over the center of the storm, unfortunately, again, plenty of divergence aloft, just again indicating that the storm is going to have plenty of fanning out. We saw that on satellite imagery. You saw that kind of fuzzy, almost tie-dye look to the edge of the clouds. That, again, is indicating to me the storm is strengthening as we have divergence aloft. Now, as we move this ahead later on into the week, that kind of continues with some divergence aloft. Now, we are going to see some stronger shear values to the north. So, that may, help us a little bit, but that could also hurt us. I mean, you're getting, again, still this divergence ahead of the storm. So that's still not really helping us a lot in terms of fanning the storm out. Also, going to increase the rain threat in Florida. Like I mentioned, that predecessor event also, this is going to be fanning out a lot of moisture towards the state well ahead of the storm. Very similar to Helene, honestly. It's just kind of flipped sideways this time, the setup. Again, that could be a problem. But here we go, up to landfall. I mean, the GFS really clamps down on upper level support here. Look at, again, just like Helene, all of this big time upper level divergence ahead of the storm. Again, that's going to create a lot of lift in the atmosphere. That's going to deepen this pressure and, again, bring a lot of rain to the state of Florida as we get this divergence aloft. Now, up here in the Carolinas, again, don't worry. That's all dry air parked over you, so you don't need to worry about it. But again, a supportive upper level environment for this storm to strengthen before, again, eventually kind of gets ripped apart by stronger wind shear after it crosses the state of Florida. But the Gulf of Mexico, unfortunately, ready for business and ready really just to do some damage. So now what you want to see. All right, taking a look at some ensembles here, GFS ensembles. Again, you'll note here we've definitely uptrended in intensity. Most of these members now on hurricane status. Most of them, again, clustered pretty tightly here into the Tampa Bay area. So again, like I said, Tampa Bay has been relatively spared. We've had a lot of storms that have done this over the past couple of years, or even this like Irma did. But it's been a very long time since we have had a storm come from the Western Gulf and just beeline it towards the west coast of Florida. We had Ian, but even then Ian kind of, again, curved. It wasn't really just this straight shot like this storm is trying to take. Again, you'll notice kind of curving here in nature, but still, you get the point. Kind of a strange storm setup that we haven't seen in a while, and I can't really think of a good analog off the top of my head, but again, something you just don't see every day. Now, unfortunately, the European ensembles were not working, so I couldn't pull them up and show them to you, but what I'll tell you is it's similar to the GFS. And either way, I think the GFS ensembles are handling this well enough that we can show that and probably get away with it. But what I will note, again, if you're up here kind of towards Steinhatchee, that area, I would watch this too. And if you're as far south as the Keys, I would watch this. It's going to, sorry to smack the microphone. I do this almost every video. I got to get more room. But we're going to get this seesaw effect with the storm. So again, it can move further north than Tampa Bay. It can move further south. Fort Myers, I'm watching this like a hawk. Tampa Bay, obviously, I'm watching this like a hawk. The Florida Keys, I'm watching it too. Again, just because we're going to see some sways here in the model guidance. All right, something we're going to do together here is take a look at the hurricane models, and I got a sneak peek of it, but I did not really look at the whole thing, and unfortunately, I'll tell you right off the bat, this is probably worst case scenario what the hurricane models are going to show you, just from what I saw earlier this morning as they were beginning to run. But here we go. HWRF model, again, fires this thing up quick. This is tomorrow afternoon, already nearing hurricane status as a 987 millibar storm. And again, I know this seems quick, but with these small storms, I cannot emphasize this enough, things happen quicker. So do not be shocked tomorrow to see at least a tropical storm. This model showing a hurricane by tomorrow evening. Again, it's not out of the cards, folks. Things have really upticked pretty quickly here. And then it just goes from bad to ugly. The H4 develops this into a major hurricane. I mean, this honestly, folks, is near Category 5 status. This is just north of the Yucatan Peninsula, so down here's the Yucatan. This is Tuesday morning and afternoon. And a very quickly strengthening storm, and then it just maintains that very strong status, continues working east, luckily weakens a little bit, as it looks like a little bit of dry air here on the south side, maybe trying to kind of hit that eye wall some, but still a major hurricane. Here's Tampa Bay, here's Port Charlotte and Fort Myers. Just to give you an idea, this is Wednesday evening. And then the storm pulls north a little bit, and we get landfall right basically over the Tampa Bay area by overnight Wednesday and into the early morning hours of Thursday. So again, not a good look. And this, like I said, I'm kind of flabbergasted myself how quickly this went from not a big deal to, almost a dire situation potentially for some folks with a storm of this intensity. We'll take a look at another model. This is the HAFS-A model, another hurricane model, and we'll move this ahead into time. Again, similar story. By tomorrow, we've got a strong tropical storm, low-end hurricane strengthening, getting its act together, continuing to strengthen, deepening that pressure. I'll just move this ahead quicker. Again, gets about to the exact same intensity as the H-Wharf did, and a pretty similar track, a strong hurricane. Although the good news on some of these hurricane models I'm noticing is upon the final approach to Florida, we're seeing weakening. This, again, I think some of that dry air kind of entraining into the storm here at the last second. So that is good news. Again, we're going from potentially Category 5 down to probably Category 3 at landfall. And again, a weakening storm, hurts a lot less than a strengthening storm. But again, very similar track here, although a good 12 hours earlier. This is Wednesday afternoon, just north of Tampa Bay, and then crosses the state and gets out over the open Atlantic. So again, not what you want to see, and we'll kind of zoom this in one more way to show you potential impacts for the state of Florida. Like I mentioned, another predecessor rain event, much like Helene, just in a different place here. Look at all this rain well ahead of the storm through the Sunshine State, specifically south of the I-4 corridor here. Into Monday afternoon. I'll move this further ahead into time. This gets us into Tuesday, heavy rainfall in front of the storm, and then obviously the storm itself moves in by Wednesday afternoon and evening, brings even more rain, and then gets on out of here. So as much as many of you are going to look at the storm surge and the wind, that is going to be a problem for sure with the uptrend that we've seen. But rainfall is something I'm very worried about. The GFS showing a big swath of 1 foot to 2 feet of rain here through portions of Florida where the center of the storm goes. And then to the south, again, with some of that predecessor rain, potentially 6 to 12 inches. So a lot of rain showing up on that model. European, a similar story, just shifted further south here. And we'll fine tune exactly who's going to see the worst of the rain. But just know, I think somebody in the state of Florida is going to really get it good here, rainfall wise. And then obviously this is a hurricane, wind and storm surge wise as well. So really just not what you want to see by any means. All right, well, this video has already gone on much longer than I expected, so we'll kind of breeze on through the rest of it here, but luckily, the rest is pretty easy to talk about. All right, latest satellite imagery. Here comes our cold front. We got a storm system up here into Canada. Look at this cold front behind it. Again, that's the big storyline. We do have kind of this plume of moisture trying to get pulled out of the Gulf here a little bit behind this old front that is kind of sagging through this region. Those are kind of the two big players right now on satellite, and you can see that pretty well on radar. Again, that front sagging through the south. A lot of rain here off the Carolina coast into South Georgia and through the Gulf states, specifically on the coast themselves. So again, a lot of rain there. You would expect that with that stalled out frontal boundary up into the northeast. There's kind of the center of low pressure for what is left of that front. And again, bringing a good amount of rain here through portions of Maine, Nova Scotia, and up into portions of New Brunswick as well. So definitely seeing some good rain totals for you folks up that way. Also seeing a little bit of rain clip in the Dakotas here with that storm system, but most of it staying up into Canada currently. Watches, warnings, advisories up into the northern tier. A lot of wind with that storm system. So high wind warnings for much of North Dakota, Montana. Red flag warnings to the south of there. Again, it's going to stay pretty dry. Not a lot of precipitation. And a whole lot of wind on the way. So do not burn anything. Obviously, go ahead and make it easy on your local firefighters. Obviously, they don't want to have to fight a forest fire. So again, just go ahead and make it easy. Don't burn anything. All right, moving this ahead through today, still seeing that continued rain through portions of Maine and southeastern Canada. Also, again, seeing continued rainfall here through the Gulf Coast, specifically through Florida, South Georgia, down through coastal Louisiana, as that stalled out frontal boundary continues to work on through. Now, at the same time, here comes our cold front, and you can tell because here are some troughing features, and this is kind of meteorology, some meteorology to teach you here. Anytime you see these troughed isobars, that is generally a cold front. All fronts sit in troughs, warm fronts too, but this one, in this case, is a cold front, and you can see that even with this precipitation kind of over that front as well, almost an antifront of sorts. But either way, not a lot of precipitation out of this for the United States. I think the UP of Michigan, northern Wisconsin, going to have the highest chance of seeing rain. That would be overnight tonight into tomorrow for sure through those regions. And then we move this ahead. Again, a lot of rain into Florida. Like I mentioned, that setup is going to bring a lot of it. This is tomorrow afternoon. Also tomorrow afternoon, this cold front tries to spark off some thunderstorms into the northeast, specifically Pennsylvania northbound into New York. We could see a couple of these turn strong to severe. Main threat, I think would be strong straight line winds, maybe a little bit of hail. Could not rule out a tornado, but again, not a perfect setup for tornadoes. And you'll even notice some that tries to get as far south as the Virginias here by the evening of Sunday and overnight into Monday. But not a whole lot of rain. Again, just enough to kind of be notable here in the forecast. Now, we'll kind of pick up where we left off here. This is Monday morning. And you'll notice here, again, some of that rain continuing to work on through the northeast with that front, but behind it, beautiful high pressure settling in. Things are going to cool down, at least dry out. So if it's been kind of muggy where you live, again, it's going to get a lot drier here. And we'll move this further ahead at a time. That front moves all the way through, and by the time we get to the middle of the week, look at this beautiful 540 line. Boy, oh boy, did I miss it. Or just that kind of blue line, this thickness value that you're seeing right in here, indicating that the column is below freezing from the surface to 500 millibars. So generally speaking, that's kind of the rain-snow line of sorts, depending on your setup. But again, look at that park right over the northeast. It's going to feel really nice up into the northeast during the middle of this week. In fact, even some back-end snow showers through East Canada and maybe the high terrains of New England, not out of the question. Obviously, here's the hurricane, and I mean, you really couldn't have a more fall-like, kind of October-like looking forecast here. Hurricane in the Gulf, 540 line over the northeast. I mean, that's really about as October as it gets, to be honest with you. And yeah, we continued this ahead. Obviously, the hurricane moves through. We talked about that, but that area of cold air, that pocket of cold air continues over the northeast. And there are signs in the long run, maybe 10 days from now, an even stronger cold front may try to work on through. And this one could even be our first lake effect event of the year, during the middle of October here, not out of the question. Dew points here, again, kind of going through the middle of the week. Look at this nice rush of dry air. By the time we get to Wednesday and Thursday, I mean, it is really nice outside of the state of Florida. We're obviously still dealing with some tropical air there as, a hurricane kind of moving on through. That'll do it for sure. But north of there, through really the entire lower 48, very nice, crisp fall air. It's going to make it feel great. And just to give you an idea of what temperatures could be like here, this is our Wednesday afternoon high temperatures. And look at these temperatures only getting up into the 60s and 50s through New England, down or up into the 70s through portions of the mid-Atlantic, down through the Ohio and Tennessee river valleys. And then warmer out west as a ridge kind of tries to take hold. But through the east of the Mississippi, very nice, almost fall-like weather for just about everyone outside of the Gulf Coast. Evening lows Wednesday night. Again, we could get down to freezing through portions of the Northeast. Definitely sweater weather, though, for really just about everybody, even down into the Carolinas, getting down into the 50s, through Tennessee into the 40s for Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana. So, again, kind of a pattern of big diurnal swings next week, I think. So, very low morning temperatures, pretty pleasant to warm afternoon temperatures. So, one of those sweatshirt in the morning, t-shirt in the afternoon, kind of patterns here, I think, for this coming week. And that's about what you would expect this time of year. So not necessarily that this cold front is strong and going to get us well below average, just more or less going to bring us back closer to where we should be at this time of year. Alrighty, folks. Well, again, I appreciate you hanging in there. You folks in Florida, again, praying for you, but you gotta keep an eye on this forecast because, again, it's one that does not look good, to be honest with you. So with that said, again, have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, and I'll see you all tomorrow.